This is the largest state house in the Dominion. Everybody else in the street thought that the government was putting up a new school or a theatre until they saw Mr. and Mrs. Hall and their extra XOS family of 12 move in. Boys, Trevor and Owen, are kept busy in preparing the ground for planting potatoes, whilst their sisters take advantage of the sunshine to do their mending and sewing. Mrs. Hall has a lot of room now and modern facilities to enable her to wash and dry her linen and the clothes for her family. For the first time in her life, Mrs. Hall has a real stove to call her own, and she can now provide many extra delicacies for her family. This will make a pleasant homecoming for big brother Brian, now serving overseas. There'll still be room for him at the family table. Back from the World Security Conference at San Francisco, the Prime Minister receives a civic welcome in the Wellington Town Hall. A Maori party leads him to the platform. Mr. Fraser received an illuminated address bearing the signatures of 20,000 citizens, and in the course of his address he spoke of the Organization for International Peace.
The organization is built, and if it is used in a wholehearted, single-minded way in purity of heart and singleness of purpose, then there can be no doubt at all that it will succeed. One word about the British country. Before we went to San Francisco, there was talk about a British bloc that Britain would have 5 votes. Well, they don't think so now. But that doesn't mean for a single moment that there is any cracks in the unity of the British Commonwealth. On the contrary, we are firmer and closer together than ever before. I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, the paradox, the glorious paradox of the British Commonwealth has been that the freer we are, the more closely united we are, the more independent we are, and I found it difficult at San Francisco to understand what some meant when they said, oh, self-government doesn't mean independence. Well, it does mean that in the British Commonwealth. Every one of our countries are sovereign states. And the more independent we are, the more we realize we're interdependent. And there's something more important in the scheme of things today than paying lip service to independence, and that is a realization that not only the nations of the British Commonwealth, but all the nations of the earth are interdependent and should go together.
When Hitler's armies were loose in Europe, we heard much of these men. They're Marshal Tito's partisans, the Yugoslav Army of Liberation. Their deeds amazed the world, yet as these pictures show, they're no army of mechanized might. Throughout their campaigns, they moved like this, on foot, on horseback, and in carts, making forced marches unparalleled in history. They had no organized camps. When halted, they simply turned loose their horses and flopped down to rest or sleep. Tito's partisans are a people's army. With no pay, they risked everything for their cause. Women lived and fought beside the men. Mere boys fought beside their fathers, and all shared the food when and if they had it. Some wear German uniforms, some British, materials for which were dropped by parachute from British planes and made up in a hidden factory which also made their boots. With the Germans systematically burning their villages, their hospital had to be hidden among the craggy mountains in the heart of the country. This is the way to it. A drawbridge was raised after patients were carried in. There was no Red Cross here. For protection, hand grenades were tied to trees, and the tracks were mined. With buildings carefully camouflaged against air attack, 100 patients could be cared for here. Some of the men examined magazines left by British and American airmen who were saved by this mountain hospital. Once for 2 weeks, the Nazis tried to starve them out of here and failed. Then they tried to burn them out and failed. The final defeat of Germany put an end to further efforts, and this is how Ljubljana, the university city of Yugoslavia, celebrated victory. Last night, the Germans were driven out. After 4 years of German occupation, they have good reason to celebrate. From the balcony of the university, a famous Yugoslav poet makes the first liberation speech. Other speakers include a Russian officer. Thousands of people from here were hounded into concentration camps, and others died fighting a well-equipped army in the mountains. Though Tito's army was ill-equipped when they began to fight, they received some weapons by parachute from British planes. Others they won from the enemy at the price of lives. Here are piles of weapons left by the Germans in southern Austria, just across the Yugoslav border. German weapons and equipment marked the way they fled. This is Tito's army, whose story is the story of a people's army. They helped to win world freedom.